It Happened on the Job, the podcast for relatable conversations with contractors. Sponsored by Goodman Insurance.
Welcome to It Happened on the Job. We are your podcast for relevant and relatable conversations with contractors, hopefully bringing a little bit of entertainment to you as well. My name is Mike. That's Brian.
Hello, hello.
We are episode 54 today.
53.
50.
Are we 54?
53. You're right. 53.
See, we're getting over the hill. We're starting to forget things.
My bad.
Yeah, and today we have Eric Soderin, project manager for major capital projects for Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. How's it going, Eric?
I'm doing well. How are you guys today?
Thanks for joining us, man.
I should probably preface the fact that not only are we talking about construction today, but I've known you basically since we were tiny, right?
That's right. The interweb, the internets have brought us back together over the years, and
super crazy.
made it really neat to catch up, and I'll also share just the subject today. So it's a small world indeed.
Awesome. Well, hey man, just if you could give us some background in terms of how you got started in construction and what you're doing today, and maybe even
everything in between.
And everything in between.
All right. I grew up in Southern California and came to really Cal Poly as a college student, majored in construction management. In high school and maybe junior high, just kind of tinkered and then kind of developed shadowing people I knew who were in construction, and just kind of felt like I wanted to go that direction. Getting accepted to Cal Poly into their construction management program, it just kind of gave me a formal setting to, I think, study and kind of learn how big the world of construction is. I was fortunate just to kind of be able to go to college and stayed with the same major. I was one of those rare people that entered with the same major and exited with the same major.
I was not that
I was going to say, I entered with one, changed, and then exited without any. So,
yeah. Oh, wow. All right. So kind of over the years, have worked for different types of contractors and worked for an engineering company, and then finally ended back at Cal Poly about 15 years later. This July actually is my 5th year at Cal Poly in the facilities planning department. But college just gives you a base for what your knowledge is, and really you don't start learning, I think, till you get out, or if you're participating in an internship doing that, where you really learn how much you don't know, but learn what you need to know in the future, and also what direction to go in. So kind of right out of the gate, I wanted to stay in San Luis Obispo. It's a wonderful area. I didn't want to go back down south and work in construction, believe it or not, or go up north to Sacramento or San Francisco, where they were really kind of encouraging college graduates to go work. I went to go work for a commercial contractor building kind of structural steel buildings, and then other kind of public works projects, and then moved to a civil engineering company where we just performed construction management and inspection. And then also I was roped into the engineering meetings when we'd be talking about civil design projects and kind of constructability. They were a multifaceted engineering firm, but they really strive to have those of us with maybe more construction backgrounds be a part of their design process, which is really helpful. It really made it feel like we were important, some of us who kind of had been in the trade work or in the construction world.
well, I'm sure it brings a bit of reality to that process as well, right? Because I mean, an engineer is seeing everything on paper.
Yeah.
And you with the boots on the ground experience can probably interject a little bit there as well.
Yeah, I thought that was a big stretch for me, going from someone who was always construction minded or field minded to then working more in an office setting with engineers, but also learning how they think and progress in their design, and all the review cycles and phases for design. And then from there I moved to working for a contractor who was a license A civil contractor, general engineering as they call it. And they actually hired me out And that was about 2008, 2009. So the economy was going down and not a lot of projects were happening in the engineering office. Yet a contractor who I had worked with in the prior years, noticed me, and they asked me to come work for them. So, and this contractor, we worked on wastewater treatment plant work and landfill work and roads and other public utility projects. The landfill work was really interesting because of the different aggregates and the timing of the different materials having to be backfilled and covered, and just a really interesting niche. And then also the wastewater component of it kind of tied into the leachate drainage systems, which is basically the sludge of all the decomposed material. And after working for them, I transferred and worked for another general engineering contractor where we specifically worked on water and wastewater treatment plants. And I had a 1-year-long project at a certain plant improving it. And that was actually back in San Luis Obispo. I've always stayed living in San Luis Obispo, but just the travel time and driving to projects got a little tiring. And I have 3 kids. And so just being home, trying to be at home every night at a good time was always kind of a goal. I just try to put my family first in many things still. It's tough, but kind of then transferred to Cal Poly and right directly into the kind of the role that I'm in right now, and just been enjoying it. It's a unique place, I'll say. It's kind of its own little world, its own little city within the greater city of San Luis Obispo.
What drew you to the construction management program at Cal Poly back when you were in college? I mean, I can't remember what your dad did for a living, but is it because of your dad, or you just always loved construction, or what was that?
It was really just on my own initiative. My dad actually worked for a bank and was a manager at a bank. And it was just working with my hands and the curiosity of building things, and then just wanting to take that into a career, not just at the junior college level, but at a 4-year. My parents had just encouraged me, go to a 4-year while you can. If you want to go into the trades, you can, certainly afterwards. And I really just went directly from high school to Cal Poly. It's a 4-year program, but it took me about 5, to be honest. But that's kind of typical.
Well, I feel like that's Cal Poly, right?
Yeah.
That's Cal Poly.
I went to school at Santa Barbara, then I had a couple friends that went to Cal Poly. So I've been on that stretch of the 101 in between the two plenty of times, and it's pretty much the same lifestyle in Santa Barbara as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's a 4-year plus program.
Yeah.
I had a buddy. I mean, I might have stayed at your house back then. I can't remember. Were you living with Eric Johnson at the time?
I was, yeah.
Okay, so I probably stayed at your place. But there was a friend of mine who I knew that was there, and I remember, and I was at a private school at the time, and he was telling me how he had to crash courses and sit in on these courses over and over and over again until maybe something came up, which is why it pushed that 5th year. And that was totally foreign to me. Like, if you're paying a lot of money for school, you just get into the class, right? You don't have to fight for it. So anyways, that's neither here nor there.
That's basically how it extends out your education. Right. Or you do an internship, and it might be going into a quarter of your academic year. Maybe you do a 6-month internship from June to December. Some people would. And so you miss that fall quarter.
Right.
Some people's situations would be like that, but that wasn't mine.
Got it. Well, maybe we could talk about that internship, or we could talk about getting out into the real world. You had mentioned it a little bit ago, but did it transition well going into actual construction versus what you were learning in the classroom? Or were you finding out that there was a whole lot of the real world that was
how big was that gap?
Yeah.
I think you quickly realize that there's kind of book smart, and then there's field smart or street smart.
Right.
And you learn that, necessarily in a class, they're not concerned about the technical nature of things being put together like you would as a tradesperson, but they are thinking about the bigger picture. You're thinking about the schedule, the budget, the financing of project, the larger just documentation side of it. I was only 18, 19, starting college, and so you kind of don't know too much. You know enough to kind of get that direction of where you want to go in life, but when it comes to actually thinking of a career, it still sounds so daunting, I think. But and then when you finish college, you kind of have, I think, a better feel for it. And that's why a lot of people still change jobs or change within the role or the industry of construction, you know. And certainly for me, I thought I liked general building construction, like license B work, vertical construction, but I ended up liking kind of general engineering work, underground or earthwork projects or public utility projects. It's just as interesting and technical and a whole different type of style and nature.
Right.
So what are you doing for San Luis Obispo now? What is your day-to-day look like, and what kind of projects are you on?
All right. Before COVID and all that, I would say, because it kind of morphs it, and I work at home, but go also now into the office just because we're trying to socially distance ourselves. But I've been a project manager the whole time, and I'll be given projects from about all the way down to 500,000 to larger up to about 20 million. And one of the first projects I got was replacing the heating hot water on campus, which heats about 2/3 of the building on campus, and then also the domestic hot water systems and using heat exchangers and kind of industrial pieces of equipment like that. But it was replacing the pipeline, which is a return and supply pipeline throughout campus. But we didn't start the construction of that. I was helping with the design of that. And that project was over the course of 2.5 years. It probably took about 6 months to work through the design of it. And then we broke ground for construction, but the budget wasn't all assembled and intact. So we had to break up the construction and the construction documents into about 3 contracts and working with the same engineer, but breaking up the condocs in a way that we could have phases. And there were a number of other projects happening at the same time on campus. It was the largest housing project, but it was a student housing project that had about 1,700 beds. And we had to get ahead of them. I wanted to be ahead of them in the street before they did all their utility tie-ins. And these pipes in the street were 8-inch diameter pipes that we were replacing. I can go into detail about the project later if we need to or want to, but more or less, that was really one of my first big projects. And that went throughout campus. And to me, that was very typical, just to be in the street, to be in the sidewalk, to have fencing and signage. But you can imagine being on a campus where it's a residential community, it's an academic community, it's a sporting event community. You know, you're not always welcomed with setting up fencing and making noise and sawing and backup alarms and, you know, all those pieces of equipment. You know, to me, that's heaven. You know, that's just fun. But to others, it can be disturbing. And so that kind of makes working on a university just all that more interesting and complicated, but also challenging, because you're working near people who, you know, their mindset's academic or their mindset's education. So you're kind of a disturbance sometimes.
I was going to say, yeah,
They like the finished product.
Yeah, a little bit of a distraction there.
Right.
What
So anything like that's kind of just taking and getting used to for sure.
Yeah, for sure. What part of the process? You said you got brought in on that first one pretty early. Was that because you had that engineering background? Was that pretty typical of the project management where you're at now, or is that? I mean, was that typical or not because of your background?
Yeah, I think it was typical of the background. I was going to be hired initially to help develop a large equestrian arena that was a part of a grant that a donor gave. And that project wasn't far enough along in design, but there was enough of this one that I could be given. And so nobody was really familiar with as much underground and civil work as I was. And so it was given to me. And I've kind of over the years just become the campus's more underground project manager. Certainly others have some experience, but just in terms of having 15 years maybe or so of experience in different ways, you kind of just get used to the way methods of practice are done, what the contractor's thinking.
Right.
The list goes on.
Yeah.
And so therefore, since then, my projects have all been related to work that's like that, kind of in nature.
And what kind of control do you have over the subs being hired and who's working with? I know part of it's probably the different regulations and you have to fit certain things in there for government work, but what kind of control do you guys have? And I guess not necessarily control, but input and control over those subs do you guys have? Do you have?
Yeah, the campus is interesting in the sense that it has its own forces on campus that conduct work, but for the majority of our projects, we do publicly bid them out.
Yeah.
And then there's also some donor projects that sometimes they will donate, and maybe a little components don't have to be publicly bid, but for the most part, 95% of all the work is conducted through a public bid process. And so that means prevailing wage is paid to the workers. And those projects are much like any city would advertise them. You would have a public bid opening, or you would have a pre-qualification if it was an RFP process for a design builder. On the larger projects, meaning usually about 20 million or more, they seem to switch gears into being a design build just because of the extended value to the owner, and the design kind of streamline seems to be kind of that contract method. And then there's also different types of contract methods, but all the work that's performed, then ultimately those people are kind of paid prevailing wage, in the subcontractor or the bid packages are bid out publicly. So much of the work is still publicly bid.
Are a lot of these subcontractors? I got to imagine in specific trades and disciplines, there's probably only a few, right? Or at least up and slow, or are they coming in from out of town and bidding on these projects? Or I guess my question really is, what's your relationship with a lot of these subs? Do you know them pretty well now that you've been there for several years? And
Is it pretty regular?
Yeah, it's a good question. San Luis Obispo, really, we're insulated.
Right.
By Santa Barbara, an hour and a half.
Yeah.
From the south, I'll just say 2 hours in each direction. You got Monterey, 2 hours north, 2.5 hours, and you got Bakersfield, 2 hours east. And it makes it hard for a daily commute for contractors to bid and send their crews home every day. And so if they're paying per diem for them to stay in local hotels, then that's a cost. And so the contractors locally kind of have an advantage.
Yep.
However, it's still pretty bare bones around here. There's plenty to do work, and the market just bears that. However, we do get the outside contractors from all over the state once we get to a certain project size, and that is not usually like a distinct amount, but maybe for your $10 million or up jobs, you seem to start to get a lot more out of town contractors, just because they can build in the per diem and the added overhead, that for that particular project. A lot of the contractors I do work with, I know and knew prior to coming to Cal Poly. A lot of the contractors really are still small businesses, I would say, to medium size, just locally. With the amount of work, it's really limited. There's not a lot of large projects going on that would be similar to Orange County or LA or San Francisco. That's kind of why Cal Poly is unique and why I wanted to come work here is because it alone is like its own little city. You know, it has everything that a real city would have. Aside from Diablo Nuclear Power Plant, Cal Poly seems to be, that I've noticed, really about the only equal type of place that has the central heating systems, central cooling, all the intricacies of different buildings and electrical systems and power distribution, you know, within the property of just this campus. So,
Yeah. Do you guys retain any labor force outside of the project management staff that assist in these projects at all, or is it just you and the GC and all the subs?
no, there is a large trade shop staff, which is all your trades that we're all familiar with carpentry, plumbing, electrical, landscaping, and they conduct the daily maintenance, but they also do supplement in some of the project assistance, because you got to imagine you have these campus buildings and other infrastructure that we're familiar with as Cal Poly employees, and the trade shops are. And when it comes to tying into maybe utilities or building right up against an existing building, you know, it really helps to have staff that is intimately aware with what the system is like, what's going on in the building. If it's a large maintenance project within an existing building, you know, we sure need our trade shop workers to assist us in that, because it would just cost and be very cumbersome to pay a contractor just to come in cold turkey, familiarize themselves with something that's existing, and still try to do it fast. And so the trade shops are really important. And they don't conduct their own projects of large size. You know, we don't have to necessarily compete with them. We use them for assistance. And my department's really the capital projects side. And then there's another operations side, which is all the trade shops and all the daily work.
Maintenance and all that kind of
Maintenance,
stuff.
yeah, that's conducted. And once the maintenance gets to be over a certain dollar amount or size, then it kind of spills over to my office and becomes a project.
And are you guys all under the same kind of umbrella, or is it capital projects and trade shops?
It's pretty separate.
Yeah.
I mean, we are working daily together. You know, I'm close with all the trade shop supervisors, your MEP and your carpentry or your landscaping type of supervisors, and then they have their employees under them. It's, you know, it's modeled much like maybe a subcontractor structure would be, but they are doing their own work, and then we essentially hire them. We get estimates from them to perform work.
So they actually bid things for you guys. It's not just like, hey, we need you, come do this. It's they actually have to put bids together and
yeah, they do.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Just they're signatory to labor unions, and so we have to oblige some of the work to them out of that agreement.
Right.
How's it right now with the coronavirus and, you know?
Yeah, I gotta imagine campus is a ghost town.
Yeah, that, and you're in the middle of summer, so I gotta imagine you guys are probably pretty busy right now, being a university and construction, and not as many academics going on. But that being said, with coronavirus and everybody pretty much being sent home, at least student-wise, did you guys find yourself getting more busy, or were you kind of having to figure things out, you know, in terms of all this new state daily, hourly changes that were happening, especially in March and April?
It's the latter. We've had to adjust, and I would say the work has kind of just been slower or maybe slightly below average. Really just because all the support staff that we usually are using, everybody's working at home. We don't have the access to them and walking into their office or having a quick meeting as easy. And, you know, everything changing mid-March. The students, they finished their quarter at the end of March. and they didn't even have spring classes in person, and they didn't have summer classes, and they're certainly not having fall classes, as we've heard recently. It's made the campus really quiet, and I would hope we would have been able to react a little faster and just take advantage of the quietness of it. But for the most part, our productivity's been impacted too, and just in terms of prepping, using our design consultants, our engineers and architects who work off campus, or throughout the state, they're slowed down too. So, everybody's just kind of screeching.
Well, I have to imagine part of that is because what you guys do relies on so much government funding or grants or those kind of things that obviously have slowed down as well. Whereas I think if you were in the private sector doing what you were doing, it probably would have been, hey, let's go balls to the wall because there's nobody here right now, and you have private money. But with public money, I'm sure all that stuff is kind of just tightened up real quick, and nobody wants to spend anything because they're not sure what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah. With some of the projects that I do have, it's street and a parking lot improvements and modifications, and with no students or staff really coming on campus and
would have been real easy, huh?
The public safety and parking services group, has lost a considerable amount of just revenue, which who would ever thought, nobody would be coming to a university that's, been in session since the early 1900s, nobody's coming to campus, paying. And so they've lost a big revenue stream, and they're considered a client of facilities. That's the way we kind of treat them. And because they have projects and they have needs. And so we try to service them through either maintenance or new projects. And then also housing, very similar. There's not really anybody staying in the dorms because everybody's home. Yeah. And so some of the projects that some of my coworkers are helping on, they've either just had to be put on hold or modified in a way that it's just changed. So, those groups are just examples of people losing income and not being able to further the construction projects even on campus.
Yeah.
Not a lot of funding comes directly from the state anymore. A lot of it's self-generated or donor or
really
other means. Yeah. It used to be that way. And I've been told it's just changed, maybe since 10 years ago or so. There's so
you think, especially in a state school like that, not a private school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really more related to the building capital costs, of course, education, and of course the academic, those.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's probably why they have all the names on all the buildings, right? Because that's where they're going to generate the funding to pay for those kind of things.
Right. Right. Okay.
Any what's the coolest thing you've done there that you get to drive by and be like, man, I was a part of that one?
One was really brief. There's probably two. One was the transformer for the entire campus. It was a project about 3 years ago that we get 70 kV, so 70,000 volts of power to the campus, and it steps down in a transformer, and those power lines come from PG&E and steps down the voltage into multiple phases and then distributes it through the campus. And we had to have a full outage of the whole campus for half a day, which we did that in summer. We had to plan that. We had to organize the impacts of that. And we have marine biology and science classes that really have 24 hours, 7 day a week, either
aquariums,
cryogenic freezers, or free. Or
it's not just something where you send out an email, hey, power's going to be out from this time. You can't just do that.
So grandma that's been in there for 20 years, I wake up.
Yep. And so we had to organize generators, standby generators for that. Also, some of the other departments have computer servers that really have 24-hour needs, and they have backup generators, but making sure
to the backup generators
is not impacting those kinds of things. And then the second project was probably the stadium towers, not stadium, but a sports field tower for the football and soccer team. Just kind of super unique because there's very light steel structure that all it is the observation towers for the football and soccer practice fields. But just to know that those are going to be used, and the little coaches stay up there with the little video cameras, and they were 60 feet tall, so they were good size, and it was fun climbing up in them and see the view.
Are they power lifted, or do they got to climb stairs all the way up?
No, they climb stairs.
Ooh.
But what it does, it prevents people from having to be in a scissor lift or buy one of those or rent those every time.
Right.
Now they got one that they can just have the conduit and the wiring run up to, and they just plug in their video recorder, and that's it. And it's very convenient. And I know a lot of mid-state and eastern state, universities and colleges use that. But I was told this was the first of that style installed in California. Not even like at USC, Brian, or others.
Right on. Right on. I have to say that.
They use scissor lifts, or they use other means. They didn't use these fixed towers. So
what's on the horizon for you guys? Anything out there?
Well, the project I've been working on the last 9 months is in result to a landslide we had in 2017 when we had some heavy rains. Part of the hillside slid down and didn't damage and injure anybody in a dorm, but we have a dorm called the Fremont dorm, which a landslide, the dirt came in and hit the conference room, and everybody was really evacuated because you didn't know how much more sliding was going to happen. And it's taken 2 other quick response projects to stabilize the hillside, but now we've hired a design build team and a consultant to help us figure out exactly where the earth is moving and build a retaining design for that. So we're in the process of working through the design and the pricing for that. And that's a design build project. That's certainly interesting. And the pressure of getting that dorm built, that dorm opened back up is pretty great, just because it's been down for going on 1.5 years now.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's one of those things where you don't want to waste your time either. You don't want that earth to move anymore.
Oh God, no.
Yeah, no. And it moved in 2019 with a little bit of the rain too. It kind of, there was another mudslide even after it was kind of cleaned up, and the soil was removed from hitting the wall. There was just some minor cracks in the side of it, but it could have caused more damage if things moved more. So we're currently assessing the cost and the design for that. And then just another large street project, kind of that I'm working on. So, I certainly have enough work, but some of the other projects have just been put on hold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So to raise the capital for those, is there a team? I'm assuming there's probably a team at the university that's trying to raise funds to get people to donate so that you could continue those projects. Is that how that's working?
For my type of projects, really the parking services or
that's pretty necessary.
Operations budgets really generate a lot of the funding for mine. So I'm kind of lucky. I don't have as many other, I think, funding difficulties that some of the other colleges have, like your College of Engineering or College of Agriculture, that, if they want a project, they need to somehow generate it internally, or have a donor give them money, which has kind of been a ladder kind of situation a lot. And then working on a project and developing that, would be in response of having those funds. So they all have their own little nuances, I'd say. But mostly for the civil and the infrastructure projects, those are state funded, or they come from a source that's pretty solid and, secure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How many are you typically working on at the same time as far as projects?
My workloads, I probably have about 8 to 12 that you're kind of working at different phases. Some
just
into budgetary, and you're just trying to assess the scope. Others, you know the scope, you've met with the owner on campus, and you're trying to figure out who to hire as an engineer. One project is replacing about 6 manholes in this one sewer trunk line, and I just haven't been able to get to it. It's not a dire project to get done, but it's just one of those maintenance ones that now that we have no students, it's really easy to set up fencing in an excavator or backhoe to take out a manhole and just really replace it. But on the other hand, I'm just busy with other projects. I just can't kind of get to it.
Yeah.
But the funding is all unique, and it changes, I don't know, almost annually, just with a new donor. Sometimes if a donor wants to bring in $150 million to build a science project or a science building, that moves a lot of people and gets a lot of people's attention.
Yeah.
The manholes aren't as important.
Stop what you're doing. And this guy wants his name on his building real quickly.
So, and maybe speak to that a bit. 8 to 12 projects is a lot. How are you getting through that on a daily basis? Is it kind of like putting fires out all the time, or do you have do you use a system in place that keeps everything very well organized so that way you're not always having to put out fires and be reactive?
Yeah, that's a good question. With all the different projects, they're in different phases, and some of the dollar amounts vary. They're not all multi-million or $10 million jobs. Some of them are really small. And one was a electrical marquee that looks like a large TV, more or less, but it was installed right outside the Performing Arts Center, which we have our own Performing Arts Center. It's much like a Orange County Performing Arts Center or a large theater, but really all over the Central Coast. It serves anything from concerts to orchestras to plays to touring bands and all that. But just to answer your question, I have little projects like that, so I'll be working on those, and then the larger projects seem to take my time. And once the bigger projects get started, if it's not too invasive inside the campus, the bigger projects can kind of run themselves. I find the smaller ones need a little hand holding.
Yeah.
Or they're so distinct in their timing that they take a lot of attention.
Right.
Coming to the campus, I'm used to construction projects where you'd set up a fence and you kind of just work within the fence and you finish everything inside the fencing and you pull the fencing and the project's done. Whereas at Cal Poly, you're working inside an area that people are going back and forth daily to class or going to work, and they're not in construction. They don't really care about construction necessarily. They're there for the students more or less. And we really are all there for the students. But, my mindset's always a little more construction bent for sure. But the little projects, you kind of just have to find your groove. Definitely the finesse with scheduling and responding and being a little squeaky wheel yourself to get information and news and answers from people definitely helps. And, it's just building relationships and staying in good communication and time management. It certainly is a skill to just better, even if you were good at it before you came. So.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool, man.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, really appreciate you having on the let me rewind. We're not going to edit that out either because,
let it go.
Yeah, no need for bloopers. If you could just let everybody know, because I got to imagine there are people that are going to want to know a little bit more about what you guys do. Let everybody know where to find you and how to get in contact with you.
I'm at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in the facilities planning department and capital projects. I'm a project manager. And so we're in the facilities planning building, and we're under the umbrella of improving the campus. My email, if you wanted to get a hold of me, certainly is esoderin@calpoly.edu. And Cal Poly is just CALPOLY.edu. You certainly can reach out. Let me know that you heard my name on this podcast. And if you have any questions, I'll get back to you. Certainly just always like to share what's going on the college campus. It seems to be always the forerunner of what is happening in the next 5 years or 10 years for churning out students and churning in all industries, not even construction, but you kind of just have a pulse on what people are thinking and what's going to then hit the marketplace really as far as employment for the next 5 years, so it's a really good thing.
I'm thinking too, remember Angie Simon, Western Mechanical, I believe, she went to SLO. And so she runs a very large HVAC group up in San Francisco, I want to say.
Yep.
But she was, I think, episode, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. But her thing was they would hire a lot out of Cal Poly because of what you had just mentioned, because of the forward thinking and what they were teaching at the school. And a lot of times these kids that were coming in, they might not have the street smarts yet or the field smarts, but they were teaching new processes and new things to
always kind of staying on the cutting edge.
Yeah, which is actually very cool. So for sure. Eric, thank you so much for coming on today, man. We really appreciate you. And I think you're going on vacation in a day or two. So
have fun.
Yeah.
I'm going to take some time off to take a break for sure.
Go hang out with the grizzly bears. Cool.
From a distance.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Social distancing from the Grizzlies. Cool. Well, thanks, Eric. Appreciate you. And thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
All right.
Hey, thanks for listening. And if you've made it this far, go ahead and give us a like or 5 stars or whatever means you like us.
Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. And check out our website for more video content and extras.
While you're there, shoot us a message if you want to be a guest. We'd love to have you on.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.